Hello and welcome to Sunday Politics in Northern Ireland. The EU referendum campaign is at its height. With less than a fortnight to the vote, the Leave and Remain camps are fighting hard to convince the electorate how life here would be if we stay or go. We'll hear from the former Director General of the World Trade Organization, who's warning of the damage he says a Brexit would inflict on our economy.
This would be an act of wanton destruction of economic viability for Britain and Northern Ireland in particular to leave this market.
But the Leave campaign believes getting out of the European Union can only be good for trade. We'll hear the views of the Secretary of State, Theresa Villiers. And with their thoughts on all of that and more, my guests of the day are Felicity Huston and Chris Donnelly. Well, it's been a campaign of claim and counterclaim, and it's set to get more intense in the run-up to the big vote on June the 23rd. Farming, immigration and border controls are all issues, but the main focus has been on the economy and the potential impact here on investment and jobs. The Dublin-born former European Commissioner and founding Director General of the World Trade Organization, Peter Sutherland, has been warning of the consequences of a Brexit. When I spoke to him earlier in the week, I began by asking him why he believes leaving the EU would be so bad for the UK economy.
Well, for the same reasons that every independent an analyst in the world virtually has said that it will be bad for Britain. The IMF have said it, the Governor of the Bank of England has said it, the Treasury has said it, the Prime Minister has said it, the OECD has said it. It will cause a grave, serious and prolonged period of great uncertainty. It will disrupt trade flows and will create a major problem for the British economy. And within that context, there is no area in the United Kingdom that will suffer more wanton destruction, in my view, than Northern Ireland.
What do you think, then, would be the impact specifically on the Northern Ireland economy if the vote on June the 23rd is for the UK to leave the European Union?
It will create major problems, in my opinion, and this seems to be corroborated by the Chancellor of the Exchequer in what he said in recent days, in terms of inward investment, in terms of the difficulties of trading even within the island of Ireland. It will cause major difficulties in terms of the future exporting capacity of the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland towards Europe. It will damage Northern Ireland agriculture seriously. Again, as the Chancellor has pointed out, it is, to me, incredible that any political force in Northern Ireland could conceivably consider that this could be a good thing for Northern Ireland, including the Secretary of State.
Well, the Secretary of State obviously takes a different view to yours, as does our DUP First Minister and Economy Minister, and they all believe that Northern Ireland and the UK would be better off outside the European Union. They say we'd be perfectly capable of trading internationally as we currently do, and the UK government, for example, would replace EU subsidies from the revenues it's no longer sending off to Brussels.
They, as you expressed them, are a tiny minority in global political and economic circles. Everybody, from the President of the United States to the head of the IMF, to Prime Ministers of Commonwealth countries like New Zealand, Canada and Australia, think that this would be a bad thing for Britain, a bad thing for Europe, and it will certainly be a bad thing for Northern Ireland.
What the Leave campaigners say is that is a cosy international cabal of self-interested individuals and organisations who don't want change because change would damage their future prospects, even though it might be better for the average man and woman on the street.
That, to my mind, is so ludicrous that it barely requires a response. Is this true of the Governor of the Bank of England? Is it true of the Treasury? Is it true of the head of the IMF? Is it true of the head of the WTO? It's ludicrous to describe them as a cabal who in some way are trying to protect their own interests.
You're a former Director General of the World Trade Organization and a former chairman of BP, I think the UK's largest company. What do you think the impact would be on Northern Ireland trying to attempt foreign direct investment if the vote on June the 23rd is to leave?
I think that it would definitely have the effect of causing investors to go to another place within the European Union, because those who invest in Ireland, north or south, are doing so because it provides them with a manufacturing base to sell to the European Union. And the uncertainty, the borders that will be created by Britain leaving, the inevitable period of prolonged negotiation will lead to a drying up of investment.
You know that Leave campaigners say that the European Union market is a shrinking market, that Britain, the UK, Northern Ireland needs to look to other markets internationally, globally, which are growing, and that's where it should be trading.
The first thing that will happen will be that there will be a recognition that what you describe as a declining economic area is an area of 500 million people. It is the wealthiest area, 29% of global GDP. It is enormously important for British exports today. It cannot be supplanted by the tiny fraction of those exports that today go to places like India and China. The second point is that if Britain leaves, borders will be created with the rest of Europe. Goods will have to be checked. Borders will have to be applied in terms of tariffs and non-tariff barriers to goods that at the moment can freely pass across borders throughout Europe. This would be an act of wanton destruction of economic viability for Britain and Northern Ireland in particular to leave this market and create years of uncertainty and negotiation about the future.
And what do you think directly the implications would be of a vote to leave on the relationship between the United Kingdom and the Republic of Ireland, and specifically between Northern Ireland and the Republic?
The border between the Republic and Northern Ireland will become a border of the European Union with somebody outside the European Union. This will create a border control requirement of a kind that we had thought banished to history. If in some perverted way there is an ideological desire to recreate that border, it's an act that would be incredibly foolish and very damaging.
Enda Kenny, the Taoiseach, voiced his concerns at the possibility of a leave vote. And the First Minister, Arlene Foster, suggested diplomatically that he should mind his own business, effectively. Do you think he should continue to be involved in the debate?
Well, if that suggestion that he should mind his own business was meant seriously, it shows a naivety that is utterly surprising of a serious politician. Of course it is his interest, and it's everybody's interest on the island of Ireland, and more generally, that this debate should be conducted in a way that recognises the damage done to both economies, north and south, by Brexit. It would be ludicrous for him not to express his concern, because it is entirely legitimate.
Peter Sutherland pulling no punches in terms of how he sees the future for the UK outside the European Union. Let's hear what my guests of the day, Felicity Huston and Chris Donnelly, make of all of that. We'll come on to Lough Island in a moment or two, but let's talk about the EU referendum first of all. Felicity, what did you make of the Secretary of State's response to Peter Sutherland? I mean, Peter Sutherland is not a man to be underestimated. He's got a pretty significant CV. You weren't persuaded by anything he had to say, were you?
Peter Sutherland's the man who chaired Goldman Sachs International, the great vampire squid on the face of humanity, as Rolling Stone described Goldman Sachs. He was also sitting on the board of RBS, when Fred Goodwin was running mad and nearly bankrupt the country. You know, he has a remarkable career, but he has also made some fairly massive misjudgments. Why
And
would
you think this is another?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I don't agree with him. I mean, he has a very specific worldview, doesn't he? He thinks that globalisation is it, we must go for it, just corporatism is it, you know, big companies, that's the way it should be, that's what he's done all his life. So, of course, he sees it like that. He doesn't look at democratic deficits and things like that. That's not his view.
Chris, which of the two persuaded you?
Well, I would go more with what Peter Sutherland was saying. I think up to this point, looking from a North of Ireland perspective, this has been a very British discussion for obvious reasons. The fact that Peter Sutherland is now speaking in such strident terms, the fact that Enda Kenny has become increasingly involved, I think he's canvassing in Britain this week, shows that from the Irish state's perspective, the levels of anxiety on the Remain side are getting very high, and they have to speak almost in a selfish strategic sense in terms of the interest, what they see as the interest of the Irish state, and very clearly they see that with the Remain side winning.
OK, very briefly, what do you see the border scenario looking like in the event of a Brexit vote on June the 23rd, which is what you want to see?
I do, yes, that's right. I think we should leave for all sorts of reasons. I mean, I'm not an expert in immigration procedures and policies. I think it'll be a bit like travelling to other countries. When you go to Switzerland from other parts of the EU, that you don't go through massive queues and border controls and things. It'll be something. And with modern technology, you know, that automatic thing they have for your car registration numbers, readings like that, that's the sort of stuff we'll use for checking goods and so on going through.
I think bringing the border back physically is, in a visible sense, it's a very psychological move, and I think that this discussion is something that's going to almost incentivise nationalists in the north to turn out. OK, all right, let's just pause for a moment and take a look back at the political week gone past in 60 seconds with Gareth Gordon.
An independent panel made its pitch on disbanding paramilitary groups.
We are an executive absolutely united in facing down the criminal gangs and paramilitary groups within our society who are determined to plunge us back to the past.
The police ombudsman found there was collusion between some RUC officers and the UVF gang behind the Loughlin Island massacre. Two former Prime Ministers arrived in Northern Ireland predicting Brexit could spell trouble for the peace process.
It would throw all the pieces of the constitutional jigsaw up into the air again.
But those in the Leave campaign were outraged.
Two former Prime Ministers of the United Kingdom arrived, and they made an outrageous and disgraceful assertion.
Though at Stormont, the focus was already shifting to the other big European story.
Robbie Keane or Kyle Laverty?
You're asking a Fermanagh person, Robbie Keane or Kyle Laverty? Kyle Laverty.
What about Robbie Keane and Kyle Laverty?
Gareth Gordon ending his report with a bit of sport at the Executive Office Committee. Chris, a quick word on Loughlin Island.
I think it just shows us the report. The past remains a very uncomfortable place. It's a contested terrain.
Felicity?
I think everybody should read Ben Lowry's article yesterday in the newsletter. Very good analysis.
OK, all right, we will leave it there. Thank you both very much indeed. That is it from all of us. Back to Andrew in London. Bye-bye.